I'm Tracy Stigler, and I'm the Vice Chair of St. Hope Public Schools. The vision of St. Hope Public Schools has always been to build one of the finest public schools in America, and I think we're on our way. This organization is in its 9th year of operation and has had great success in closing the achievement gap. At PS7, our kids are hitting it out of the park. PS7's first class are seniors, and in their very first 2 months of their senior year at Sacramento High School, they have already been accepted to 24 colleges and universities, some of these students with full scholarships. Secondly, proof of success is evident when charter schools begin modeling their programs off the success of PS7. For the kids in the audience, this is the one opportunity that I'm going to say that it's acceptable for you to copy the homework of the colleagues that of your colleagues when they've completed their work. For the adults, I'm going to say that there is a time to steal. The student body at PS7 is over 80% African American is outperforming all the subgroups of students across the city of Sacramento and the state of California. The PS7's overall API is 911 compared to a state API of 778. The bottom line is that PS7 students are learning and are preparing to succeed in high school and excel in college with the expectation of earning a diploma and having a positive impact on our community. Turn to your neighbor again and say, these kids are hitting it out of the park. Now I'm going to make it a little more challenging. Turn to your neighbors and say, neighbor, no, you got to hear it first. These kids are exhibiting an extraordinary tendency to be consistently and incredibly phenomenal. Yeah, let's go back to these kids are hitting it out of the park. We are honored to have been selected as one of the schools highlighted in this report on African American student achievement, and this recognition serves as validation of the incredible work that has been occurring in these classrooms for the past 8 years. The students, the parents, the teachers, and the staff are fully committed to doing whatever it takes to ensure that each kid succeeds. It's not rocket science. It is simply old-fashioned hard work on everyone's part. With that said, it is my honor to introduce the next speaker. He began his career as a teacher in South Central LA, obtained a bachelor's degree from Georgetown University, has an MFA in playwriting from UCLA, and an MBA from Northwestern University. I introduce to you the President and CEO of California Charter Schools Association, Mr. Jed Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Stigler. It's an honor to be here. And thank you to the entire PS7 community for hosting this event today and for giving us a chance to showcase what is, one of the real success stories within the state of California, to showcase what is happening here as well as at other schools like it across the state of California. We have a number of community leaders that are here today. I want to thank all of you for being here. In particular, I'd like to thank Mayor Johnson for being here. Mayor Johnson has shown earlier in his career that he knows how to do a full court press. And as far as supporting education reform within Sacramento, he's showing that he's remembering how to do a full court press. Thank you for your ongoing leadership and for your attendance here today. We are here today to note the release of a report called Chartering and Choice as an Achievement Gap Closing Reform: The Success of California Charter Schools in Promoting African American Student Achievement. This report focuses both on the enrollment and the performance trends of African American students enrolled in both charter public as well as traditional public schools. The report highlights all sorts of reasons for optimism. But the thing that I think is important to focus on at the onset is that charter schools are showing that they are able to accelerate the performance of African American students. We have heard over and over again about this persistent achievement gap that exists within American public education. There's supposedly this unbreakable link between low performance and the enrollment of certain groups of students, low-income students, African American students, and others. But what we are seeing in California's charter schools is that supposedly unbreakable link is dissolving before our very eyes. And it is dissolving at places like PS7 and schools like it across the state of California. You will shortly hear in detail from the authors, from the report's author, about the findings that are in this report. But let me just highlight 2 key points. As far as accelerating the performance of African American students, there really is no equivalent within public education today. Charter schools are doing something unique. Charter schools are doing something unprecedented. And we're here today to really highlight the fact that that is happening and to encourage the broader society and reform community to embrace what is happening at places like PS7. Secondly, we are able to uncover within this report something that we've been familiar with at the association for quite a while, which is that charter schools are enrolling higher percentages of African American students than our traditional public schools. And we believe that that is a product of the fact that charter schools are simply performing better with African American students. We are simply generating results that African American parents recognize and appreciate, and which they then demonstrate their appreciation of by enrolling their students in higher and higher numbers. The report uses multiple measures to look at how charter schools are in fact generating these better results with African American students. Some of the measures are ones that are commonly talked about in education. Other measures are ones that we've developed at the association ourselves. One of them is called the Similar Students Measure. The thing that's important to remember is, regardless of the measure that you're using, however you look at how charter schools are performing, they are clearly performing far better with African American students than our traditional public schools. We at CCSA believe, knowing that there are so few schools within the public system that are really generating unprecedentedly good results with African American students, and knowing that an impressive percentage of California's charter schools in fact are, charter schools then represent a key community resource that we should be leveraging to broader impact in Sacramento and in communities across the state. We believe that the results provide an opportunity for California to study more deeply what actually works with African American students, and we have included within our report some of the findings about what some of those practices are, practices that you see proudly on display here at PS7. So with that, I would like to turn to introduce the author of our report, the Director of Research at CCSA, Aisha Tony.
Thank you so much, Jed, and good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for being present. The report we are releasing today is the culmination of over 2 years of work examining the enrollment and performance trends of African American students in California. Given the annual analyses we conduct as an organization at CCSA, we first noticed this trend a few years back. As we saw the trends that you will hear about today that we're presenting in this report persist over time, it became very clear to us that this was a key area that we needed to investigate further so that we could understand the breadth of these trends, as well as try to uncover some of the practices that might underlie them. Given the history, in particular, of African Americans in the U.S. and the persistent achievement gaps that African American students suffer from, we felt it was particularly important to unearth the success of charter schools in educating this traditionally underserved population of students. Toward that end, we conducted a host of analyses, both quantitative and qualitative, as we will overview in this report. We assessed African American enrollment, average API scores, as well as English, language arts, and math proficiency rates. And we did that using the California Department of Education's publicly available data files. We analyzed these data across grade levels, a number of key districts across the state, as well as a number of charter-specific variables. We also assessed a subsample of schools that serve a significant population of African American students, i.e. those who have enough African American students to receive an African American API score on our internal measure, which Jed referenced, our annual school performance prediction, percent predicted API measure. This measure compares a school's actual API to their predicted API based on regression analyses that control for the impact of student background on school performance. We also assess this sample of schools on our 3-year similar students measure as well as our broader accountability framework. In addition to these quantitative analyses, we conducted 3 case studies of schools doing an exceptional job of serving African American students. In order to be a case study school, each one of these schools had to have an African American API score of at least 800, and their African American ELA and math proficiency rate had to be at 65% or higher, which is above the state average. We chose 3 schools operating in major urban districts that were also predominantly African American. Those schools were Kittbridge in Oakland, Watts Learning Center in Los Angeles, and our host for today, PS7 here in Sacramento. With that wealth of information, we found a number of promising trends. I'm going to highlight a few of those key findings for you now, and of course direct you to the report where there is much more detail. I think it's about 75 pages, so there's a lot more to hear than what we have time to present right now. African American students are enrolled in state charter schools at higher rates than are in our traditional public schools. While African American students represent 6% of California public school students, they represent 9% of charter public school students. This trend has been persistent over time despite a decline in African American families and students in the state of California. And we have seen this trend persist across grade levels and in 4 of the 7 key districts we assessed. Here in Sacramento, African American students are over twice as likely to attend a charter school. We also assessed the statistical relationship between African American enrollment and school API performance, a relationship, as Jed mentioned, that is typically negative. We did that so that we could understand if chartering was diminishing that race-based trend, and that's exactly what we found. Typically, a school's API score decreases as African American enrollment increases. However, in charter schools, that negative relationship is 3 times weaker or 1/3 as strong. Using our internal accountability framework, again, which controls for the impact of student background on performance, we found that charters serving a significant population of African American students are about 4 times as likely than similar traditional public schools to outperform their predicted performance. Looking at more traditional performance measures, charters have consistently earned higher African American API scores, and you see a visual of that to the far left at the bottom. This trend is true statewide among elementary and middle schools, as well as in Los Angeles, Oakland, Sacramento, and San Francisco. And we also see similar trends when we look at ELA and math proficiency. Performance here in Sacramento has been particularly impressive, and we have a brief snapshot of that, of the API performance over time for Sacramento. Here in Sacramento, charter public schools have substantially improved African American performance, growing African American API scores from an average of 660 to 836, an increase, yes, it's worth a hand clap. 836, that is an increase of 176 points in just 4 years. It's phenomenal. When you sit with this data day in and day out and you see how slowly API can creep up, 176 points is phenomenal. That average 2010 African American API score of 836 was 154 points higher than that for traditional public schools, which have only grown 13 API points for their African American students since school year 2006-07. 13 compared to 176. Here in Sacramento, African American English and proficiency rates are equally impressive, where charters rates were 20.3 percentage points higher than traditional public schools for ELA and 24.6 percentage points higher for math. They were also higher than the statewide proficiency rates for all students, thereby closing the achievement gap for African American students in the Sacramento City District. Again, worth a clap. Statewide, the achievement gap for African American students definitely persists. And you can see that here in the graph on the bottom in the middle. However, charters are doing a better job of narrowing that gap, with gaps that are approximately 19 API points lower on average. In general, few schools fall into the category of PS7 and the other schools that we profiled in this report of being highly effective educators of African American students. But charters are more likely to be in that category. While charters make up only 9% of schools statewide, they represent 39% of highly effective schools for African American students. Here, of course, at PS7, this is one great example of such a school in Sacramento that has eliminated the achievement gap for its African American students. Eliminated. PS7 has improved its African American students' API performance by 159 points from school year 06-07 to school year 09-10. 159 points, to a high of 908 at that time, and as was said earlier, to 911 in 2011. PS7 has also improved ELA proficiency from 47% to 73%, and math from 50% to 87%. And we do want to emphasize these numbers are well above state averages, not just for African American students, but are well above state averages for all students. Proficiency rates for all students across the state hover in the 50s, high 50s at best. So these are very impressive rates and are really going beyond closing the achievement gap. What you're seeing here is African American students performing better than most students in the entire state on average. These highly impressive results are significantly better than that of African American students attending the district's traditional public schools, where African American performance was 184 API points lower than that of students at PS7, and proficiency rates were 30 and 38% lower in ELA and math, respectively. Lastly, in conducting our case studies, we first combed scholarly literature about best practices for educating African American students, from which we then created our observation, interview, and focus group protocols that we use when we went to our case study schools to examine them. With amazing precision, what we observed at our 3 case study schools, which of course included PS7, was exactly what the literature said we should see in a school that is effectively educating African American students. And we have a summary of those key findings here with a wealth of detail in the report. In the report, you will find literal examples of exact practices, exact policies that are being implemented in these schools that are destroying the achievement gap. What did we see? We saw a strong focus on academic rigor. We saw high expectations for students, also for parents, and also for staff. We saw an understanding and catering of students' diverse needs. We saw strong, data-driven decision-making. These schools analyze their students' performance data literally often on a daily basis, certainly on a weekly basis. We saw incorporation of cultural and life relevance to engage students. We saw caring interactions and relationships. We saw strong school culture. These schools were very intentional about the policies they implemented, about the norms that they cultivated within their schools, and everything they did was strategic, and it was explicit towards a specific goal. We saw standards-based, results-focused, curricular and instructional practices. And all of this with high levels of accountability for all constituents to ensure that all of these features were working at their best. In sum, what these case studies illuminated is that what effective schools are doing and what African American students need is simply good teaching. in equitable educational experience. And that's what we saw here at PS7 as well as at Kip Bridge and Watts Learning Center. And I feel pretty certain that had we had the time to go to all of the schools that fit into this category, which again was very small. I'm talking about 20 schools in the entire state who had achievement high enough for African American students to qualify for our case study. But I'm pretty sure that we would have seen the same practices. As I said, there are many more findings and much more detail than we can overview at this time, and we definitely ask you to review the report for those details. But for now, we must move forward. I would like to introduce now Margaret Fortune, President and CEO of the Fortune School of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tony. I have to book you publicly. Will you come give that report to my parents at Fortune School? I want to start by saying thank you to the teachers of PS7. Those that founded this school and those that have stayed, those that have come and made their contribution and gone, those that are teaching right now as we speak, holding their children to high expectation. Thank you to the teachers. I want to also thank the present school leaders, the past school leaders. I want to call out Harinder Pagani, who's in the room. He's created with and through his work at St. Hope and PS7 an extraordinary, extraordinary model that is now being replicated throughout the state. And there are children going to school here benefiting from it. And there are children going to school in San Bernardino right now benefiting from it. There are children going to school in South Sacramento benefiting from it. Mayor Johnson brought in Mr. Feinberg, who was one of the co-founders of KIP. And years ago, when this was a dream, and I remember Mayor Johnson in his Jeep at that time, driving me by this school site and saying, Margaret, this is going to be a school. And then driving me by a dilapidated hotel and said, this is going to be 40 acres. And I remember thinking, I think this is actually the first time I had met him. And I was thinking, all righty. Sure it is. And when's that going to happen? Well, here we are.
All right.
The story here is that African American students in the state of California who on a major scale are in last place in student achievement, if given good teaching, can move to first. And they are. The story here is if you are an African American parent in Sacramento County, charter schools are your Northern Star. Now, just like those days when we were in slavery, it took courage to follow the Northern Star. And there were people who went and said, the Northern Star is your way to freedom. First, won't you follow me? I'll pave the way. These educators at PS7 and at St. Hope and at these 20 schools across the state, they are our Harriet Tubmans. They are pointing the way to the Northern Star and they're saying, there is a way. It is your choice. Come and we will provide a high-quality education to your children. And when we do, they will move from last to first. There are some that would have us to believe that there must be something special about these children, that we must have creamed them, that there must have been something extraordinary about their parents. And they're right. We are extraordinary. And each of these children is special. But they're no different than their peers who are sitting in other classrooms around this state not having a similar experience. Let me just walk over and make the point. This is the story. The vast majority of children going to traditional public schools in Sacramento County are performing at levels that are below grade level, and yet their peers in charter schools are performing at grade level or better. That's the story. If you're a parent that is making a decision, it's your choice. It's your choice. It's no longer about systems. It's no longer about districts. It's no longer about rumor. It's no longer about unions. It's about your children. And it's about following what is best for them, even if it takes courage. If you're an educator and you want to be free, it's about following what's best for your passion, which is to educate children. I'm extraordinarily proud of the work, and if I were in church, I'd be running laps. You'd have to get a nurse and pat me down. Sacramento is a city that's on the move. It's a city that's on the move. We're going to take those who have the least, and we're going to give them the most. And we're going to have Dr. Tony out to spread this story, to talk about it in every venue that she can possibly talk about it, because now it's backed up by data. Now it's backed up by data. I have the great pleasure of introducing Marie Cole, who is a parent at PS7. Are you here, Marie? Come on up. There are other parents who are among us. Give us a wave if you're a parent at PS7. Yes, parents, wonderful. And she's going to talk about her experience as a parent. But I want to first thank you for having the courage to stand up and to stand up for your children.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello. My oldest son, is a senior at Sac High this year. He was the first fourth grade class of PS7 when Mayor Johnson first founded the school. I found the school on a fluke, where it's now, I believe the building is called Heaven High. There was just yard signs out. It was in the summertime, fourth grade was going to start, and there was signs out that said, charter school opening, enroll your student. And at the time, which now it's Triumph, that was the St. Hope first building that we had. So I went and met Mr. Pagani and Miss Burke, and signed up all the paperwork, and they said, oh, you'll be getting a letter. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I was accepted. Well, not I. My son was accepted, which it was I too, because for my son, who I was led to believe in the third grade and the second grade had a learning disability because he finished his work sooner than the rest of the kids. So he would get distracted, and he would distract his classmates because he was done and they didn't have time to give him extra work. So we went to PS7, and that wasn't the case. He excelled. He was an overachiever, which was a blessing. It was something that was okay. It wasn't frowned upon. He was pushed, encouraged, and encouraged more and more to excel. And as he did that, it made me look at not only helping the school, but wanting to be more a part of his education. Because at a regular public school, you're not really allowed to just walk in and say, hi, how you doing? Can I help? They say, no, we have a PTA for that. But not here. It's an open door policy. You get to come in. You get to do your hours. They want you to be here more than 40 hours. So I kind of became a fixture at the school, and which was a blessing. John did leave and go to another school for about a half of a school year. He went, and it was a very bad experience. It was a very eye-opener for me as a parent to not be able to come to the teacher and say, what's going on with my student? Why is he not excelling in class? And, well, your student, I don't even know who your student is. I'm sorry. How do you not know who my student is? He comes here every day. So it was a very rude awakening. So, of course, we did come back after 6 months of being gone, and was welcomed back with open arms Mr. Pagani, and we've been back ever since. And it's just good. It's very family oriented. So to see these scores and know that my son has contributed to this is awesome. It's just, you know, it's, to me as a parent, it's like breathtaking, like, wow, you know, this is what my son is a part of. And now I have another one who's in first grade who's also here. So of course I'm still a fixture and just moving right along. But thank you for starting the program when I was actually in high school. That's when St. Hope first started, and we got to go for tutoring. To see this as PS7 is just very, very awesome. Thank you.
So now it's my pleasure to be able to introduce Mayor Johnson. I already made reference to the full court press. I'm just going to, what I really loved about hearing from the different folks here is how we've tried to take the numbers that can be somewhat cold and dispassionate and turn them into personal stories. And that's one of the things that Mayor Johnson is just phenomenal at. I will tee Mayor Johnson up by just giving 1 minute of an example from my own life. Before I got into charter schools, before I started teaching, I was in Big Brothers in South Central Los Angeles. And the little brother, who's still very close in my life, was African American. And the school that was nearby was terrible. And so that family, being resourceful, they found a way for the grandparents to have Matthew come to their neighborhood to attend a school. And my job was to pick Matthew up on Sunday, play with him all afternoon, and drive him and then drop him off at his grandparents' house. And he would break down in tears each and every Sunday afternoon because he just didn't understand why he wasn't going to be able to continue to live with his mother where he wanted to be. When you see those tears, you are filled with commitment that our traditional system is not working as well as it needs to, and that all parents should be able to choose where their kids go to school. It's grounded me from those days. And every once in a while, you meet people who really get it. And Mayor Johnson, it's been a pleasure getting to know you over the last 3 years. I sensed it in the first 10 minutes of talking to you. And as we've worked on things together, I only sense how your commitment is deeper. So a pleasure to have you here, ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Johnson.
All right, welcome to Oak Park. Glad to have you here. And Tracy Stigler, the sun has come out, so you're prophetic, needless to say. Before I get going, I just want to thank a few people. I want to thank Margaret Fortune for her incredible leadership. I want to thank Harinder Pagani. I want to thank Dr. Fortune, who somehow reared this Harriet Tubman of Sacramento very much. And, you know, when you think about it, there's some adults, the ones that I mentioned. There's the principals and school leaders who do the work up and down the state. There's the teachers who are making an extraordinary commitment to put every effort and ounce of energy they have into a classroom. And then the parents who are making the choice that is so critical for their children. And these groups of adults are putting students first. If that was just happening up and down the state, we would not have a problem. So if you wouldn't mind just giving the adults for putting students first a round of applause. So to Jed and Aisha, the report is amazing. And again, I hope everybody gets a chance to get a copy of the report. The data is critical for us to build our case. And I think the case that we're trying to build is if you give kids a good education, no matter what neighborhood they live in, no matter what their zip code is, no matter what the color of their skin is, they can do equally as well or better than their counterparts, even in affluent areas. That's the case that we're building. It's clear, it's pointed, and it's something that needs to be replicated, in my opinion. So, Jed, again, thank you both for what you do. You know, we'd be the first to say in Sacramento that charter schools are not the panacea. They don't solve every problem, but what they do is they create a lifeline for a lot of kids, and they create an environment of competition. Competition isn't a bad thing. I know we have Sac City Unified School District represented. I want to thank them for coming out. We want to work in partnership with our school districts, our counties, but we've got to create an environment where our kids have access to good schools. If that's not going to happen, then we can't wait. Those days are over. I want to say this one data point. You know, we talk about PS7. You guys have heard this. You know, just to reiterate, if you go back 4 years, the charter schools and traditional schools were about the same place. You fast forward 4 or 5 years, there's a 176 point to 13 point increase. That's a 150 point plus difference in charter schools. That is incredible. This is something that we need to talk about. It's something that we need to go up and down the state and around the country and say it can happen, and it is happening. I want to thank Aspires Public Schools, who's in the back, Capitol Heights, and Mike Barr, and the many affiliates of our charter schools that are part of the coalition in Sacramento. But here's the data point. We believe that Black and Latino kids have to have an opportunity to succeed and experience the American dream. Yes, we're focused on African American Day, which is great. Think about this one data point, that if you look at this achievement gap, in Sacramento, there's a 151-point gap in Sacramento between Black kids and white kids, 151 points. Over the last 8 years, that gap has closed 5 points. I'm going to repeat that. In the last 8 years, that gap has closed 5 points. At that rate, it will take 258 years to close the achievement gap between African American and white kids in Sacramento. I don't know about you, but we're not waiting that long. We can't wait that long. So citywide in Sacramento, in terms of third grade reading scores, just to give you another key data point, African Americans are performing at 29%, white kids at 59%. 29% African American, 59% white kids, 30 percentage points difference. PS7, our kids are performing at like 90%. So over the years of PS7, this achievement gap has been closed and narrowed, and now there's a reverse gap. So are we cherry picking? Are we kicking kids out? Do you have to test to be in the schools? You know, when people do that, what they're really doing is saying, these kids can't learn. It can't be just because they work hard. It can't be because their parents are committed. It can't be because you got good teachers. It has to be some other reason. That is not the case. So don't let anybody argue that case. It is because these kids are working just as hard as other kids, and if you give them access to all the things that other neighborhoods have, these kids can do equally or as well than their counterparts. PS7 right now in Sacramento is the top 3 or 4 highest performing elementary school. It doesn't matter what color you are. You can put in Land Park, East Sac, Pocket, any community. These kids are outperforming kids all around the city and up and down the state. Why would we not want to replicate this? Thank you, Margaret. Why would our school districts not embrace this notion of increasing the opportunities for a much broader group of kids in Sacramento? We don't believe that we should hoard what we're doing. We share our best practices. You can come and steal, beg, borrow. It's yours. But as long as kids are learning. And I look out at the faith community. If I was pastors in this community, I would figure out a way to partner with St. Hope Public Schools or Fortune Schools and say, let's do a charter school, and let's do 3, 4, 5, and 6. Because if we want Sacramento to be the ground zero or the epicenter for education reform, we have the makings of it right now. You have a crazy mayor who's willing to do anything for kids. I'm acknowledging that, flat out. Willing to take on anybody, because there's nothing more important than our children. Nothing more important, bar none. So again, on behalf of the city of Sacramento, I'm proud to say the work in Sacramento is real around charter schools. I just came back from New Orleans. 70% of their children go to charter schools in New Orleans. Sacramento, we're a fraction. What if we got to 10%? The school districts would get good really quickly if we started getting to 10%. And if you get to 20%, you're gonna have a tipping point. That's what we need to be doing in Sacramento. Yeah, I said it. That is what we need to be doing. And however, if the public schools are working in the traditional one, then no problem. We just care about all kids learning in a real way. So I just want to close with this. It's simple. Right here, 2003, we started this school. It was a vision. It was a dream. It was part of the civil rights issue of our time. that we are fighting to make sure that all kids, regardless of where they live, their zip code, the color of their skin, have access to good schools. And many people said it couldn't happen. Today is just one example of showing that it can be done. These kindergartens here, these kindergartners right outside their classroom, it says 2028. What that means is the year they're graduating for college. You can't tell these kids they're not going to graduate from college. There is no way that these kids are not going to be the first in their family to graduate from college. So I hope you do another report, and we'll be back here in 2028 talking about those kids. Thank you very much for coming out. And I think if the media has a couple questions, we'll address them, and we'll get folks. Jed, you should come up. Aisha, you should come on up. Media, any questions? Margaret, just come on. See David DeLuce in the back. Want to recognize the Urban League. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate your work as well. If you guys don't have any questions, then I'm going to ask them a question. All right, Jed. Oversimplify for the audience, what is a charter school? Help us understand the one or two things that charter schools do.
So a charter school is a public school that must serve all students and is a school that has admissions by lottery and is waived from many of the restrictions that hold back traditional public schools. That gives schools the freedom and the flexibility to do innovative things and to respond to the demand of parents who want different things from the system. So that's the way I most frequently speak about charters. And I think also if you want to have a good idea of what a charter school is, spend some more time in this building, walking around, talking to kids, talking to educators. You'll see why we are so excited about charter schools.
All right.
Tee me up for another one?
Yeah, we're gonna do. Everybody's gonna get a question here.
All right.
Media, you get another shot. All right, we'll work together here. There we go.
What prompted you to start the charter school movement here? I mean, what I guess was a turning point or made you go, okay, this has to happen?
It's a personal story, quite honest. I got a basketball scholarship to UC Berkeley, and I was a relatively, which I thought, a good student. You know, here I went to public schools my whole life, and I got to college, and my freshman year I was in an English class, and all the kids were talking to the professor about this word called euphemism, and I thought it was a foreign word. I had never heard that word, and every other kid in the classroom knew what it was, and I felt this small, and I was ticked off. So then I went back to my dorm, and I tried to look up the word. I couldn't spell it, so I couldn't find it. So it took me a little while to eventually find a word, and I made I made a life commitment at that point that if I was ever lucky enough to graduate college and go on, I'm going to come back to my community and make sure that all kids know what the word euphemism means. So what does that really mean? That I had a public education that I thought was okay, but I wasn't prepared for college. And if I didn't have basketball, I wouldn't have been at UC Berkeley. Most kids in Oak Park, they don't have basketball, they're not going to college, they're in jail, on drugs, or dead. And I said, how are we going to disrupt this vicious cycle? The only way we can do it, is through education. And the traditional system was not serving our kids. It's still not today. And this charter school movement started in 1992, 1993. And I said, oh my God, this is the opportunity for us to show and prove that our kids can learn and do well. And that's exactly why we're here today. So that was why. Thank you. All right, Aisha, come on up. So you have an audience here that has heard your report. Give us one or two things that we need to know that you found from your report that can help grow the charter school movement in Sacramento.
Definitely. Well, one thing that I think is particularly important, which Margaret Fortune brought up about the criticism that these students are different. It's important to note, as is detailed in the report, that when we looked at, in particular, our samples of African American students that we were analyzing, comparing charter public schools and traditional public schools, that difference is not there. So we looked at the average parent education levels in those two bodies of schools. We looked at free and reduced price lunch participation rates, which is a proxy for socioeconomic status. We looked at retention rates within year, and we don't see those differences. So we aren't talking about findings that can be excused away in terms of these students come from families that are perhaps more affluent, or they come from families that are more educated, or any of those things. We are talking about an apples-to-apples comparison of African American students in both traditional and charter public schools. I think for me, the key aha when I completed this report, in particular looking at the best practices. There was no point in looking at the scholarly literature, there was no point as I spent time in these schools that I saw anything, mind-shattering, earth-breaking. Oh, I've never thought of this before in education. So the key takeaway for me was this is really not that complicated. And for us to have these intractable, persistent gaps to languish for decades, knowing that there is a long history of scholarly literature that has spelled out what needs to be done. Dr. Fortune's book was a key resource in doing this research, laying out very clearly the practices, the policies, the norms that need to be instituted. It's available. We have the information. So as everyone's been saying, we're at a point where there really isn't an excuse, and it doesn't make sense. It can't be blamed on the kids. It can't be blamed on not understanding what to do. The information is readily available for us to replicate this across the state and across the nation.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Ms. Fortune, you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm gonna try to stump you.
Oh.
Let me just, no shot, believe me, I already know that. So in California, we have about 900 plus charter schools serving
Just over 400,000.
just under 400,000 of the 6 million kids, so 7% or so. So we have a lot of room to increase. So I guess my question to you, Margaret, is there's a reason why we don't have more charter schools in Sacramento, and that we have to go to other places, whether it be down in LA, we opened a charter school in Harlem, we're being asked to open charter schools all over the country. What are the conditions that you would like to see here in Sacramento that you think would help the charter school movement and allow us to serve more kids of color?
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. I think one is that we need to develop more charter school leaders. One of the things that we've done at Fortune Schools, that we've launched a program for charter school leaders, and at the end of that program, they have a charter petition that's ready to go to a school district. And we're vetting it along the way, that it meets all the requirements of finance and personnel and academic program, so that it's a strong charter petition. School boards are required to approve charter schools that meet the requirements of the law. And I think that if we can have strong school leaders who are armed with a charter petition that has been well vetted, so they have the expertise, then we can support them in going to school boards in order to get them approved. That means that we as a community have to support these school boards in making those decisions, even if it's challenging for them. And sometimes support can mean a brand of accountability, meaning that we need new leadership. And that's support too, because these are public institutions that are designed to serve us. And when we see these types of achievement gaps, it says that some of us are getting served and some of us are not. So I think the combination of strong charter school leaders, well prepared, armed with competitive charter petitions, supportive school boards that are held accountable to the public is the formula that we need here in Sacramento.
All right, I'm going to add one piece to that, and then we're going to close out with Miss Mitchell. One of you two can come on up. You guys, we got to have a kid talk at the end. A student, I'm sorry, a scholar. I'm sorry. So, you're ready. Y'all got off the hook. So I want to add two other things to what Margaret said about conditions. Facilities are really important. And there are cities around the country and school districts who are saying, look, we got empty facilities, you can have them if you can educate kids. That is the biggest impediment, in addition to the ones that Margaret said. And secondly, we need the political will to create a better environment. And who helps create the political will? You do. I'm looking out here of all you folks. If you start going to school board meetings and talking to the school board and the superintendents and say what we need to have happen, that starts to change the paradigm. So community involvement, political will from folks in the audience, and facilities are critical components in addition to what Margaret said. So we want to thank you for coming out. Are you going to come up and give us the last word? Okay, we're very excited. Come on up. I know you, Miss Dates. My goodness, you growing up. What you been eating? Tell them your name, it'll be great.
Good afternoon. My name is Kamari Dates, and I'm currently a junior at Sac High. Welcome to PS7. I came to PS7 as a 6th grader from an Elk Grove public school and was the second 8th grade valedictorian for the class of 2017. Since I started at PS7, my class was referred to as the class of 2017, the year we will graduate from college. My goal is to graduate from USC. PS7 helped me focus. No. PS7 helped me focus on preparing for not only high school and college, but life beyond those points. With a mix of strong academics through great teachers and high expectations for both students in and out of the classroom. PS7 helps their students develop skills beyond typical school subjects that will be needed, such as time management, consistent organization, a strong work ethic, and the determination to give their best effort. PS7 has instilled the attendance of a four-year university in students' minds as an expectation, not a suggestion. During my time at PS7, I visited colleges from Stanford to the University of Southern Oregon, filled out college applications in preparation for where I am today. PS7 has helped me form a strong foundation that will keep me successful in life, not just in my education. I currently have a 3.86 cumulative GPA. Take 2 AP classes, and play varsity sports. I look at the seniors from PS7 and am, while immensely proud of my fellow alumni who've been accepted into universities and colleges, I am excited about being in that position next year. PS7 and my family helped me see my own potential and become the strong, college-bound woman I am today, and to be an example for all students to come. PS7 does not produce only a few successful students, but generations of self-motivated, industrious leaders. Thank you.
Okay, look, this is the mom here. Come over, look at it. Niece, her niece. Look at it. This is family. When we first started St. Hope in 1989, the relative here was one of the original St. Hope members. And that's, how many years is that? 89, I can't add up. How many? 23? 22 years ago. And look at what we produced. Can you give them one more round of applause? Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, that concludes it. Thank you very much. Awesome. Thanks, girl. Good job.